Let's get straight into it with number one. Do you need to slurp ramen? You do not need to slurp ramen. A lot of people in English often say that it is a sign of respect, but everyone I've ever spoken to in Japan says that you can eat it however you want. The only thing that they do say is that slurping does help cool it down and also to experience the aroma. But it's not rude either way, so just eat it however you want. Next, is ramen unhealthy? Usually, yes, particularly in the case of instant ramen, then the noodles are deep fried to dry them out, and the flavor packets are basically just concentrated salts and fats. So this one that I had in my cupboard, the nutritional information says that it has 397 calories, 18 grams of fat, 50.9 grams of carbohydrates, and 6.2 grams of salt. And according to nutrition.org, then the daily recommendations for women is to have no more than 78 grams of fat, at least 267 grams of carbohydrates. But the problem area is the salt, because it says no more than 6 grams of salt. And this has 6.2 grams of salt. And I ate this today, so this is already my entire daily recommended dose of salt. And I added miso to that, so that's even more salt than I'm supposed to have. Oh dear. So can ramen be healthy? Yes, if you make it yourself and you use low salt ingredients and low fat ingredients, sure. And there are actually some places around Japan like that, particularly in Tokyo. But it is just much less common. But for many people, the fattiness is what makes it so good, so I guess just don't have it every day. Can ramen be vegetarian? Yes. Vegetarian ramen is much less common in Japan, but there are some places and even some instant ramen in Japan that is vegetarian or even vegan. What is ramen without the soup called? There are two types, and that is tsukemen and aburasoba. Tsukemen is where the noodles and the soup are separate, whereas aburasoba has no soup and is just hot, oily noodles. But you do need to eat that fast because cold, oily noodles is a little bit less enticing. I have a lot more questions to get through, but I just want to let you know that I have a different video about ramen where I go a little bit more in depth about its popularity, and that has things like what is ramen made of and how is it different to other noodles. So if you want to see a little bit more of an in-depth video, then head over there. But the next one that we're going to answer is, why does some ramen come with rice? Well, this one's simple. When you've eaten all of the noodles but you still have some soup left, you can just put the rice in and eat it like that. It's really tasty. But if you don't want rice, can you order more noodles at a restaurant? Yes, and there are two ways to do that: omori and kaedama. Omori means a big serving, and that's something that you need to order from the start. You can't order it once you've finished all of your noodles and you just have soup left. Whereas kaedama is a second serving of noodles that is added to your soup at the end. Not all restaurants will offer both of these things, so just be aware of that going in. Why does ramen take so long to make? The main reason is the broth. Usually, the broth involves stewing animal bones for a very long period of time. So then why is it considered a fast food in Japan? That's because all of the ingredients are put together ahead of time with a giant vat of soup always on the go. So the only thing that really needs to be cooked fresh is the ramen noodles, which take a few minutes tops. So if you go to a ramen place in Japan, you can often see people order their food, receive it, and then slurp it all down in less than 15 minutes. How can I make ramen eggs? Boil an egg for 7 minutes, put it immediately into ice water, let it cool down, and then peel it and cover it in soy sauce, mirin, sake, and a little bit of sugar. And let it marinate overnight, and you'll have delicious ramen eggs. When is the best time to get ramen in Japan? Most ramen places open at around 11 a.m. and then are closed between around 3 to 5 p.m. So you have those two windows of times to go, but then within those windows, the most crowded times are usually 12 p.m. and then again later at 7 p.m. So if you want to avoid the lines because you can't usually reserve ramen restaurants, then you should avoid those peak times and go a bit earlier or a bit later. What should I order at a ramen restaurant in Japan? Most ramen restaurants in Japan have a signature dish, which might be called something like osusume or tokuse, or they might even have the words recommended in English. And if this is a ramen restaurant with a vending machine, then it will usually be the top left button. That will be their signature dish, and that is the one that you should try. How do I use the vending machine at a ramen restaurant? That's a very good question because I was very confused by this when I first came to Japan. So what you want to do is first figure out the price of the thing that you want to order, and then you feed the money into the machine. Then you press the button of the item you want and a ticket will come out. Don't forget to press the lever to get your change and then give the ticket to the staff member. Then you sit down and the staff will bring the ramen to you. If you're particularly worried about reading the Japanese, a lot of places do have the English on the vending machine, but if you really don't know what to order, then just go for that signature dish in the top left. And if you're really confused, then maybe just try looking for the place on Google Maps or online first and looking at the pictures, and then you can try showing that picture to the staff member and they might be able to help you. But that's not really the recommended route because usually these places are very crowded and the staff are very busy, so it's best if you can just press a button yourself. Is it weird to eat ramen by yourself? Not at all. In fact, in cities, half of the clientele or more that you'll see at lunchtime are solo diners on their work break. What are the most famous ramen spots? The most famous chains are Ichiran and Ippudo. But in a survey last year, people ranked the top 3 as Tenkaippin, Ichiran, and Korakuen. And outside of those big names, there are also places like the Tokyo Ramen Street under Tokyo Station, as well as places like Afuri Ramen and Yaro Ramen. But those are just in Tokyo. There are tons of ramen places all over Japan, and there's no real reason to just go to a chain. If you spot a line outside a ramen place, then you're probably good to go. I actually covered where to go in Tokyo for ramen with Tokyo Cheapo a little while back, so if you're interested in that kind of stuff that I do as a food and travel writer in Japan, then you can sign up to my monthly newsletter in the description below. But the next question is how to know if a ramen place is good. The answer to that is usually if there is a line outside. But sometimes if there's a line outside, that could just be because people saw a line and then they lined up thinking that it was good. So it's just a kind of weird, never-ending cycle. So if you want to avoid that, then you can actually use Google Maps for the reviews for the more well-known places. But if you want to go a little bit more hardcore, then you can use the ramen database if you want to brave the Japanese language on that. Is there ramen etiquette? Kind of. There are kind of some unspoken rules that some people follow and some people don't. One of them is that you should taste the soup before you put any seasonings in it. Another is that you shouldn't take too much time in a ramen place, especially if it's small. So don't just sit there chatting to your friend once you've finished the ramen. Another is don't rub your chopsticks together if they're those disposable kind. It's just rude. And finally, you don't need to wait for your friend to get their ramen before you start eating because ramen is best served hot. How do I make instant ramen taste better? I have a lot of ways that I like to mix it up, but I want to keep this short, so my usual way is to add a small spoonful of miso, which adds to the salt as we figured out earlier, and then some gochujang or other spice paste, and maybe some wakame seaweed. I like to crack an egg in there whilst it's bubbling, and maybe finally some nori. But this is all stuff that is already in my cupboard, so just use what you have and see what works. How are the instant ramen flavor packets made? They're basically just the usual flavors of ramen soup that are concentrated down, then dried into a block, and then powdered. That's it. Do you need to finish the whole bowl of soup at a ramen restaurant if it's too filling? Some people say that it is too filling and too unhealthy to eat the entire bowl of soup, whereas some people say that it is rude and a waste to leave any of the soup. So really it's up to you and how you're feeling, but you should try to at least eat the noodles and the toppings because leaving behind any of that is seen as more rude, I would say, and more of a waste. So if you're kind of not hungry before you go to a ramen place, then maybe save it for a time when you are hungry because ramen is very filling. I hope that answered all of your ramen questions and filled your noodle with super soupy knowledge. What am I saying? But if you want to fill your noodle even further with knowledge, then check out this video and I'll see you next time.